Are you looking to build a dominant team in FIFA? One key to success, of course, is finding and developing talented young players. In today's video, we're sharing some tips on how you can find and cultivate that next generation of superstars for your team. From using the right scouts to training and developing your youth players, I'll show you exactly how to build that formidable squad that will dominate competitions for years to come. So if you want to take your team to the next level, stay tuned and let's get started. There's 3 questions today that I'm going to try and answer. The first one is, what do the stars mean on your youth scouts? The second one is, where should you be sending your scouts? And the third one is, how do you get better players? So let's start off with what the stars mean on your youth scouts. So every single scout, as I'm sure you've seen, has 2 star ratings, experience and judgment. First of all, we'll talk about experience, which is about how many players will be scouted per month or per report, and how effective the scout is at finding youngsters that fit the type that you've requested the scouting report for. I'm sure you've seen this before. You can choose like physically strong, winger, defensively minded. This is what this scout is looking for. If the scout has a 5-star experience, they have an 80% chance of finding the player you've sent them out to look for. If they've only got 1-star experience, then this is only 30%, and it increases with every single star rating that they have in this field. The other aspect of having a high experience scout is that you'll get more players back for every single report. For example, if you've got a 4 and a 5-star scout, the 4-star scout will on average bring back 60 players a year, whereas a 5-star scout will bring back 72. If they have the same amount of judgment, this means you get an extra 12 chances of finding a platinum player, which is something I'll go into in just a second. Judgment is a bit different to experience because a 1-star scout can still find the exact same players that a 5-star scout can, just less of them depending on experience. But with a 5-star scout, you have way better odds of finding what is known as a platinum player. Every single Youth Academy player is separated into one of 4 categories: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. The amount of potential they have defines what category they're in. For example, a platinum player will probably have potential around 90, whereas someone who's bronze could be 60 to 70 potential. So they're not going to be as good. You want the scouts that give you the most platinum players per report, and that's exactly what 5-star judgment helps with. They get about 10% of the players that they scout will have platinum potential, which is quite a big deal when it comes to managing any team at any level. You want as many of these in your youth academy as possible, so I would say judgment is probably more important than experience. It depends if you'd rather have more goes at less odds or less goes at more odds of getting one of these good players. Hopefully that made sense, because I know it is a pretty complicated thing to understand. Basically, the better the judgment, the better the players, the better the experience, the more players you'll get every single month. But that's not the only thing to consider when it comes to FIFA Career Mode scouting. That is also where you should be sending your scout, because not every region is exactly the same. For example, on average, Africa will provide a physically strong player with platinum potential 2% of the time. Somewhere like Asia or Australia, this is down to 0.1, which is a terrible odds of getting a player in this range. However, there are some very surprising odds when it comes to places you can scout on FIFA. For example, Asia is actually the best place to scout if you want a winger. All the other categories are basically the best if you scout in Argentina or Brazil, except if you want physically strong, a playmaker, or defensively minded. Central Europe is the next best region, and that's going to get you that defensively minded playmaker or physically strong player as well. So basically, I'll put on screen the exact best area to scout for every single kind right now. Technically gifted, Argentina and Brazil. Wingers, Asia. Physically strong, Africa. Playmakers, Central Europe. Goalkeeper, Brazil. Platinum attacker, Brazil, and defensive-minded, Central Europe. You can find every single player in every single region, but this is just the region that has the best odds of finding someone with that elite level potential. So now we're about halfway through the video, you know exactly how to find these good Youth Academy players. Now let's talk about how you can develop them into better players. This is something I've covered in a couple of videos before, so we'll try and keep it a little bit shorter, but I have 5 tips to help you develop your youth players a little bit quicker. The first one is making sure they're getting game time. This is something that's a little bit different to in real life. In real life, I'm sure you've seen your favorite team bring some young players on for the last 5-10 minutes of a match just to give them a bit of experience. However, in FIFA, this doesn't really work as you would expect, because if you give them a little bit of game time, they'll get a low match rating, and therefore they won't actually improve that fast. The best way to do it is to loan them out in a league where they will be getting a nice high average rating, or playing them for entire matches and making sure they're taking things like penalties, making sure they're getting good chances, and making sure they're actually good enough for the league that you're in. From some of the tests I've done, I don't think anything impacts development quite as fast as game time. In the past, it did used to be training when it was a bit more overpowered. You used to be able to get goalkeepers from 60 overall to about 85 in a single season. That kind of thing isn't on FIFA anymore, so make sure they're playing as many matches as possible and getting as high of a rating as you can. The next best thing to look at is morale. High morale makes player improve more every single week, even if they're not training or playing in games. They get access to this base level of growth, and morale does actually impact this and make them grow faster no matter how they're doing in other areas. So having a high morale can come from things like a good contract. For example, if you've got them down as sporadic but they're playing in almost every game, they're going to be really happy because they're getting way too much game time for their contract status, which means they will improve a bit faster. Making sure the team's on good form and making sure that you're always, if they ever do one of those conversation things, make sure you answer them in the right way to increase their morale. You should also have a look at player statuses and knowing what they mean. For example, if you've got a player whose potential to be special, this means they've got between 91 and 98 potential. This means you should definitely be focusing on players who have potential to be special, rather than players who might have things like exciting prospects, who, despite having high potential, are not quite as good as this player. If you know which ones to focus on, you can then actually balance the game time between these and maybe less high priority players. This means you can improve more than one player at a time, but make sure the potential to be special is the one you're giving the most attention to. My final tip is around training, and it's something I do on the first day of every single save that I start. First thing I'll do is make a new team sheet. It doesn't matter what formation it is, but make sure you can fit in as many players in the positions you want as possible. And I put in all of my high prospect players, and I just call it something like the under 18 squad. You might have seen this in some of the career modes I've uploaded before, where I have a team sheet that's just full of players who are not in the first 11, and I make sure it's the active training team sheets at all times. This means that they keep sharp, so their sharpness does go up from training. It means they're improving their stats from doing the training, and it just means that they're always going to be ready if I do need them to join the squad. I'm sure you've played with players that have zero sharpness before. They're always a bit sluggish, they're not as fast, they're not as good on the ball, and of course they don't get the stat boost that players with high sharpness do on FIFA. This is quite an important part of the game, so make sure you are rotating your squad. This does also help you get the game time in. Make sure you keep these young players sharp so that if you do have a cup game you're interested in playing them in, they can actually come in and perform well, because then they'll get the higher match rating, and then they'll improve faster, and then they'll get higher match ratings, and so on and so forth. It's kind of like a snowball effect. You just have to make sure you treat them right for the first couple of years, and then from then on, they'll basically develop themselves just by being in your first team. But if you've got any tips for how you like to develop your youth players or where you like to scout, leave them in the comments below. Thank you all for watching this far. I'll see you soon. Cheers and goodbye.